Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the US-China Trade War Conference 2020 of Faculty of Business and Accountancy, University of Malaya. Before we start, kindly switch off your mobile phones or turn it into silent mode. Thank you. Now, let us invite the conference speakers and moderator to be on stage. The US-China Trade War Conference 2020 starts now. I'll pass the floor to the moderator, Ms. Logadarshini, a Malaysia-based TV and radio personality, host and columnist. Good morning everyone. I am Ms. Logadarshini, the moderator for today. Before we begin, let me introduce the speakers for our US-China Trade War Conference 2020. First, we have Dr. Jasbir Vira, who is the Chief Economics at the Bank of Investment and Development of Vietnam. Second, we have Dr. Chin Kai-er, who is the Minister of Economic and Finance, South Korea. Third, we have Dr. Nur Atika, who is the Ambassador of Malaysia to the United Mexican States. Next, we have Professor Dr. Nur Ifadayana, who is the Professor in Economics at National University of Malaysia, UKM. Next, we have YB Amira Afika, who is our very own Minister of Economics Affairs Malaysia. And last but not least, we have Dato To Ming Wei, who is the Global Supply Chain Executive of Unilever Malaysia. This is the question that has been brought forward for today's conference. Let me introduce the topic for today. The world's two largest economies have been locked in a bitter trade battle. The dispute has seen the US and China impose tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of one another's goods. US President Donald Trump has long accused China of unfair trading practices and intellectual property theft. Whereas in China, there is a perception that America is trying to curb its rise as a global economic power. Negotiations are ongoing but have proven difficult. Uncertainties around the trade war have hurt businesses and weighed on the global economy. Therefore, today we gather here with an amazing set of speakers from different regions of the world, filled with vast knowledge and experiences in many fields to share with us their thoughts and opinions on the US-China trade war. Let us begin with Dr. Jasbir Vira. Dr. Jasbir, can you explain to us what is this whole US-China trade war all about?
Alright, thank you Ms. Logodarshini. Good morning everybody. Now, first of all, what is a trade war? A trade war is when a nation imposes tariffs or quotas on imports and foreign countries retaliate with similar forms of trade protectionism. As it escalates, a trade war reduces international trade. A trade war starts when a nation attempts to protect its domestic industry and create jobs. In the short run, it may work. Tariffs are supposed to give a competitive advantage to domestic producers of that product. Their prices will be lower by comparison. As a result, they would receive more orders from domestic customers. As their businesses grow, they would add jobs. But in the long run, a trade war costs jobs. It depresses economic growth for all countries involved. It also triggers inflation when tariffs increase the prices of imports. Now, back to the question, what is US-China trade war all about? US-China trade war is an ongoing economic conflict between two countries, which are China and the United States. This war was initiated by the United States through the increase of trade barriers, particularly tariffs. Over the past years, billions of dollars worth of tariffs have been imposed on one another's goods between China and the United States. United States President Donald Trump has long accused China of unfair trading practices and intellectual property theft. Meanwhile, in China, there is a perception saying that the United States is trying to curb its rise. Now, what are tariffs? A tariff is a tax imposed by one country on the goods and services imported from another country. Normally, tariffs are used to restrict imports by increasing the price of goods and services purchased from another country, thus making them less attractive to domestic customers. Once a tax is imposed to an imported goods, the price of the imported goods increases. The law of demand states that once the price of a product increases, the demand of the product decreases, thus causing the demand for the imported goods to decrease. Next, the quantity of the imported goods also decreases, causing net exports to increase. And in the end, the trade deficit decreases. The United States of America tariff policies aims to encourage domestic consumers to purchase local products by increasing prices of imported goods. United States of America has imposed tariffs on more than $360 billion of Chinese goods, and China has retaliated with tariffs on more than $110 billion of United States products. The United States started this trade war by targeting to increase the tariff of Chinese imports from meat to musical instruments with a 15% import duty. Later, China has retaliated and hit back with tariffs ranging from 5% to 25% on United States goods. China's latest tariffs strike included a 50% levy on United States crude oil. This was the first time that fuel has been hit in the trade battle. On October 1st, the United States' plan is to raise an existing 25% tariff on some Chinese products to 30%. United States has planned also to deliver a wave of new tariffs on Chinese goods, ranging from footwear to even telephones on 15 December. China has also plans to hit another 3,000 American products with tariffs by the end of the year. This chart shows a brief recap on the changes in tariffs for the both countries, United States and China. As we can see, on July 2018, United States has started by imposing $34 billion worth of tariffs on China's exports. Meanwhile, China has retaliated by imposing $34 billion worth of tariffs on United States exports. And on August 2018, United States has imposed $16 billion worth of tariffs on China's exports, and China has retaliated by imposing the same amount, which is $16 billion worth of tariffs on United States exports. Next, on September 2018, 10% tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese exports begin and remain effective till the end of 2018, with potential to rise to 25% after. Meanwhile, in China, they have retaliated by imposing 10% tariffs on $60 billion worth of United States goods with option of a raise. On December 2018, both countries, United States and China, has agreed to stop all new tariffs for 90 days. Next, on March 1st, 2019, President Donald Trump, the United States President, has extended the 90-day deadline. On May 2019, United States has raised to 25% on the tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods. Meanwhile, in China, their intention is to retaliate by raising tariffs up to 25% on $60 billion worth of United States goods. The tariff raised to 25% on $60 billion worth of United States goods has been effective since June 1st.
Wow, that was an eye-opener as to what US-China trade war is all about. Thank you, Dr. Jaswir. The changes in tariff sure affects the economy globally. What's your point of view on this, Dr. Chin?
Good morning to everyone. Today we are here to discuss about the impact of US-China trade war to South Korea. As US President Donald Trump intensified his trade battle with China, one of the hardest hit countries could be South Korea. When US President Donald Trump imposed tariffs, South Korea is especially vulnerable to the tariff war because of South Korea's reliance on foreign trade. Because South Korea usually exports to its two biggest trading partners, which is China and also US. So here's how it works. South Korea sends semiconductors to China, where they are placed into smartphones and other electronics. China then ships many of those assembled products to the US. Donald Trump's tariff could drastically raise the price of those electronics. For example, the cost of an iPhone X could go up by around $160 if Donald Trump follows through all his tariff threats. Higher price would result in fewer shipments of electronics from China to the US. So which means South Korea could be selling a lot fewer semiconductors to China. That could put a major dent in South Korea's economy. So despite the bad impact that the US-China war have brought to South Korea, I would like to spot out the opportunity for South Korea to benefit from this trade war. So first, South Korea has signed free trade agreements with United States and China, so this can give economic opportunity to South Korea, which made South Korea become more like a mediator between US and China, and allow them to trade in a way that circumvents the tariff. So here's the example to support my point of view. And thank you, that's all from me.
Thank you, Dr. Chin. So now we know how the economy in South Korea is affected. Let's hear from our Malaysian ambassador in the Mexican states. Dr. Atika, what is your take on this?
Thank you, Ms. Logadashini. As we have discussed earlier, there are a few countries that has been affected by US-China trade war. Mexico is also one of the countries that has been affected. Now, let's talk about the impact of US-China trade war to Mexico. Mexico has been known as one of US' largest goods and services trading partner. Because of this trade war, United States President Donald Trump has imposed 5 to 25% of tariffs on all imports from Mexico to United States. These tariffs won't have much effect toward Mexico, but it will affect US consumer as they will experience higher price increase of products imported from Mexico. For example, the cost of vehicles, petroleum, and groceries. Tariffs that has been imposed also affect US gross domestic products. Based on the report from New York Times, the automotive industry will be affected. Mexico and US have a strong relationship in automotive industry as they are not only trade with each other, but also work together to make a product. However, Mexico automotive industry will benefit from the tariffs, whereas it will burden US consumers as they need to expect price increases for every vehicles, especially those that has been imported from Mexico. Next, Mexico and US petroleum industry will also be affected. United States purchases more than 100,000 barrels of crude from Mexico in just one day. This can bring a huge disadvantage for United States. However, Mexico also buys millions of barrels of petroleum from America per day. If Mexico wants to come up with their own tariffs even though it's risky and costly, this will also benefit them. Subsequently, these tariffs will also affect the grocery. US has imported billions of foods and drinks from Mexico in 2018. This shows that US also relies on Mexico for their groceries. This tariff automatically will affect the cost of goods in US. To make it even worse, Mexico along with Canada has imposed their own retaliatory tariff towards US. This will bring advantage to Mexico as they benefits from the low cost of American products.
Thank you, Dr. Atika. Now we understand the effects on motor vehicles in Mexico. Now, let's move to a topic closer to us to relate. We'd like to know how this US-China trade war has affected the recession in Malaysia. Yes, Prof. Ifa.
Thank you, moderator. In the economy, the recession is a contraction of the business cycle when there is a general decline in economic activity. A recession occurs when 2 or more consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, meaning that GDP growth contracts during a recession. Factor that cause recession is high interest rate, which means they limit their liquidity or amount of money available to invest. Then increased inflation, which is general rise in the price of goods and service. As inflation increases, amount of money decrease will be the same as the percentage of goods and service that can be purchased. Reduced consumer confidence also can cause recession. This happens when consumers believe economy in a bad condition, they will spend less of their money. Next, reduce real wages. The worker might be making the same amount of money, but his purchasing power has been reduced. When recession happens in Malaysia, the impact are rate of unemployment increase, housing price decrease, firms are forced to recalculate resource or scale back production, and standard life will be decreased. Short-run impact the recession are trigger a global economic downturn and recession as well as global financial market volatility and connection. 20% chance that global recession will happen if the trade war didn't stop. Under the current debt model, the businesses will suffer during global crisis because interest rate will be rise.
Thank you, Prof. Ifa. That was a clear explanation on recession. Now, how did this recession affect Malaysia directly? What do you think, OIB Amira?
Impacts of US and China trade war obviously can be seen clearly in Malaysia's economy, as both of the countries are our two significant economic partners. By looking at the graph, China had always been the largest trading partner for Malaysia with a total trade of 315.19 billion Malaysia ringgit, whereas America in the third place with a total trade of 164.45 billion ringgit Malaysia in 2019. Therefore, this trade war will affect Malaysia in both positive and negative way. The positive impact is that it gives a bigger opportunity for trade and investment in Malaysia. On the other hand, the negative impacts are volatility in forex market and slower global economic growth. At the bright side of this issue, Malaysia will have a bigger opportunity for trade and investment diversion. This means that US and China importers will look elsewhere for substitutes of goods in which they have put high tariffs on to avoid any increment of manufacturing costs in producing their products. Thus, US and China act of diverting imports away from each other to other countries can benefit some industries in those economies. It is estimated that the total value of global trade that will be diverted per year to avoid tariff incidents is about 165 billion US dollar. Malaysia would benefit from US import substitution in respect of electrical and electronic products and also benefit from China's import substitution in terms of natural gas. Moreover, the first two rounds of US tariffs heavily concentrate on electrical and electronic components, which are products in Malaysia has comparative advantages in exporting. Based on the data produced by Department of Statistics Malaysia, we can see that the market share for export to United States had increased by 0.5% from 2018 to 2019 due to the bigger opportunity for Malaysia to trade with US. To support my point earlier, we can see an increase in demand for Malaysia's palm oil as a result of China putting high tariffs on US soy oil. To cover the decrease in soy oil import, China need to find other alternative, which is to substitute US soy oil import with Malaysia's palm oil import. Therefore, it is reported in Bloomberg News dated September 23, 2019 that China has been importing more of Malaysia's palm oil to substitute soy oil. Based on data statistics produced by Malaysia Palm Oil Council, China is ranked as the second highest importer of Malaysia palm oil exports in 2019. Next, volatility in forex market. Implementing tariffs on imports of goods from other countries, be it China or US, will reduce the purchase of those goods. Reduction in purchasing those goods because of the increment of cost from added tariff will result in a slower manufacturing activity. This may lead to weakened economic growth and the lower investor confidence in affected country. Therefore, the lower investors' confidence in a country's economy will make financial assets and even currencies to depreciate in value. Lastly, it's also the overall global economy, which somehow will affect Malaysia, which is an open economy country with a relatively high dependence on trade that are integrated with global supply chains. Intensified trade tensions between the top two biggest countries with largest industrial output, which are China and US, will decrease the economic activity of the countries and thus affecting the world's economy. Therefore, despite Malaysia having a greater market share in trading, Malaysia will still face the declining in exports since the world's economy performance is decelerating. It is also reported by International Monetary Fund that an escalation of tit-for-tat tariffs between China and US will shave 0.5% off global economic growth by 2020. As we can see in the data, the overall total trade is decreasing by 6.6% in 2019 for Malaysia. Furthermore, Malaysia's export and import registered a decrease of 0.8% and 12.5% respectively because of declining in global economy performance. In conclusion, continuous US and China trade war can actually affect Malaysia's economy.
Thank you, YB Amira. Following the impacts on Malaysia as a whole, we would like to hear from the industry side. What are the issues are we facing? Dato To, what is your take on this?
Thank you to the moderator. Good morning to all. According to the question, should Malaysians be worried about the impact of the US-China trade war on its overall economy? In my opinion, Malaysia should be worried about global supply chain. Global supply chain is a dynamic worldwide network when a company purchases or uses goods or services from overseas. It involves people, information, processes, and resources involved in the production, handling, and distribution of materials and finished product or providing a service to the customer. There is little doubt that US-China trade frictions are having negative impacts on the global economy. Model simulations show a trade war has both direct and indirect effects. Directly, it dampens global economic activity through lower global trade flows as well as increasing prices for households and manufacturers. Indirectly, increased uncertainty curtails business investment, increased financing costs for businesses, and depresses global productivity as global supply chains are disrupted. For Malaysia, this may be even more detrimental. Not only is Malaysia a small and open economy with a relatively high dependence on trade, but much of that trade is also deeply integrated with global supply chain. Over 82% of large firms in Malaysia and nearly half of all small and to medium-sized enterprises participate in global value chains. Besides, Malaysia has a high degree of exposure to the Chinese economy, with China being both its largest trading partner and a top source of tourists. This means that disruption to the Chinese supply chain will have significant knock-on effects on Malaysia exports. According to Ran, who is now with the China Institute of International Studies, a think tank affiliated with the Foreign Ministry, mentioned that there is the unilateral approach taken by the US. China is not the only target. It will be the only victims. The US can target anyone. The US unilateral approach is a very sharp weapon and can hurt almost anybody. If this trade dispute is not handled well, it will interrupt the global supply chain and not only hurt China, but could also hurt Malaysia and other Asian countries. Last but not least, GDP in the long run will decrease. Natural resources may run out one day due to the massive production to supply to affected countries. For the short term, production increases and GDP will increase, but when the natural resources run out, it will lead to a big drop in GDP. That's all for me. Thank you.
Now, we will open the floor for a Q&A session. Does any one of you have any questions to ask us? That's all for our conference today. I'll pass the floor back to the host. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as the speakers and moderators will leave the hall. Thank you for attending the US-China Trade War Conference 2020.